Welcome back to the Rebuild Timeline series. So far, we have determined where the first 3 Zelda games go on our timeline, which isn't different from Nintendo's version so far. But today, let's focus on placing Link's Awakening onto our timeline. Now, if you remember from the last episode, we spent a few minutes determining which version of A Link to the Past I wanted to look at, because the SNES and GBA version differed a little bit. I know that there are currently 3 versions of Link's Awakening, which include the original 1993 version on the Game Boy, the DX version on the Game Boy Color, and the 2019 Switch Remaster version. I'm going to go with the Switch version for this video because other than the addition of the Color Dungeon and the Camera Shop being replaced with Dampé Shack, the different Link's Awakening games aren't different in terms of lore. So let's just get started right away then. Link's Awakening was actually the first ever Zelda game to release on a handheld console, that being the Game Boy, and as said before, currently has 2 remakes that came out after its initial release. This game is also set in a new area for the first time in the series. Zelda 1986 was set in a small portion of Hyrule. The Adventure of Link had us explore a much larger part of Hyrule, with the first game's area included, and A Link to the Past, while the map was really new, was still set in Hyrule. However, Link's Awakening takes place outside of Hyrule in the sea that Link sets out to explore in. So let's find out what happens within this new area of the Zelda series. Before the menu for the game shows up, we are shown an anime-like cutscene of Link braving a fierce storm at sea. While he battles against the waves, a lightning bolt strikes his ship and sends our poor hero beneath the sea. At a beach, a young girl with bright orange hair finds Link lying unconscious along the shoreline. After a panning shot of a mysterious mountain with an egg on top, the title screen for the game appears. After beginning the new file, Link wakes up inside the girl's house, who introduces herself as Marin. Once Link is fully awake, he gets up and decides to go find some of his equipment at the site that Marin found him at. After being given his shield by Marin's father, Terran, Link travels to the beach and finds his sword stabbed into the sand. There he is encountered by an owl, who explains that monsters have begun to act so violently since the hero's arrival, and that a deity called the Windfish must be woken up in order to leave the island. This is what begins the entire quest of the game, where Link learns that in order to wake the Windfish, he must play 8 instruments of the sirens found within dungeons all over the island. But there's a catch. About halfway through his quest, Link must visit a sacred shrine guarded by an Armos Knight. Once the guard is defeated, Link comes across a mural that reveals the sad truth about Koholint Island. To the finder, the Isle of Koholint is but an illusion. Human, monster, sea, sky. A scene on the lid of a sleeper's eye. Awake the dreamer, and Koholint will vanish, much like a bubble on a needle. Cast away. You should know the truth. So you see, this entire time, Link was inside a dream world, and if he woke the Windfish up, the entire island, including all the inhabitants, would fade away. This reveal really impacted Link because during his quest, he became close friends with Marin. They played music together. They sat and had a heart-to-heart talk on the beach, and they even traveled together. So at this point of the adventure, Link has found out that by waking the Windfish, he would lose his best friend. And it's even more depressing because there isn't a good option for Link to stay in the dream world forever, as the nightmares of the dream would take over and cause unthinkable damage to the island and everyone in it. There's even a quote from an owl statue that reads, The windfish slumbers long, the hero's life gone. So if the windfish didn't wake up eventually, Link would have died? If this is true, then Link would lose Marin no matter what. Even if Link did choose to not wake the windfish, he would die and the nightmares would take over the dream, putting all of the inhabitants in danger. So with this in mind, Link had no choice but to continue his quest and free the windfish. But as Link continues his quest, we as the player can feel his sadness. If you listen carefully to the Southern Face Shrine theme, you'll notice that it is just an emotional, more burdened version of the Ballad of the Windfish, Marin's favorite song to sing. And in the Face Shrine, the next dungeon in the game, the dramatic tone of the music reminds the player of what is to come as we get closer to the end of the quest. In the end, Link finds all of the instruments, and after defeating the final nightmare, wakes up the Windfish, and makes the dream come to an end by playing the Ballad of the Windfish. Link awoke from this dream and found himself lying in the middle of the sea, surrounded by the wreckage of his boat. While thinking about everything he had just lost to a dream that ended, the Windfish flew above him, no longer trapped in his own dream by the nightmares. And that concludes the main story of Link's Awakening. Or does it? After the end credits, if you have gotten 0 game overs throughout the entire game, you will get a secret cutscene that reveals that Marin had not vanished with the rest of the Dream Island, but rather was able to fly around the world as a seagull. But how is this possible? Well, towards the later part of the game, Link finds Marin trapped on a bridge in the Tall mountain range, and after being saved by Link, reveals that she traveled up the mountain to make a wish to the Windfish, but would refuse throughout the rest of the game to tell Link what that wish actually was. Fortunately for us, we know what that wish was. While Link and Marin were talking at the beach, she explained that she wanted to be like the seagulls and fly around the world to sing to others. And what do you know? Her wish came true, and she was able to leave the dream world once the Windfish woke, and was free to travel wherever her heart desired. So now that we fully went over the lore presented within the game, what can its manuals tell us? Well, with 3 different versions of the game, you'd think that we would go over quite a bit, but here's the thing. The original version has its own manual with the story section, right? Cool. The DX version also has a manual, but it's basically just a copy of the original manual, and modern games sadly don't come with manuals anymore, even though there's a perfect spot for one right here. Let's be honest though, manuals have died off once game walkthrough sites like Zelda Dungeon became easy to access online. But anyway, let's analyze the Link's Awakening manual and its Japanese counterpart. Throughout the entire game, we never knew why Link was sailing the seas in the first place, but thankfully the manuals give us some insight on this. In the English version, it states that Link decided to journey away from Hyrule on a quest for enlightenment, in search of wisdom that would make him more fit to withstand the next threat to his homeland. And the Japanese version states that without time to enjoy the peace of mind Link obtained, he set out on a journey of training to prepare for new calamities. So by going with the original Japanese version, we learn that Link left Hyrule and set sail for adventure in search of training to prepare for whatever future threats would arrive in Hyrule. Other than this, the rest of the manual repeats events that were in the beginning of the game, from the storm while at sea to the part where Link retrieves his lost sword on the beach of Koholint Island. There are still a few differences between the English and Japanese manuals, but they pertain to the biography and geography sections of the video, so we'll cover those differences very soon. Other than that, we have covered all of the main story lore of Link's Awakening. As stated several times throughout the video, this game takes place outside of Hyrule on a dream island called Koholint Island. However, we weren't told where outside of Hyrule this is, but with the evidence we have so far from the game, the island must be located somewhere within the sea of our map here. But where? Well, we can find out using our trusty manuals. In the English version, it states that Link's most mysterious adventure was about to take place on the uncharted island of Koholint. But once we take a look at the Japanese version, we will know exactly where the island is located within the sea, or at least really close. It states the same thing as the English manual does, except that it replaces the uncharted island part with on Koholint, this foreign island of the south. Now we know that Koholint Island, or where Link encountered the storm, is somewhere within the sea south of Hyrule, so I'll place the island about right here on the map. Now that we have established where Koholint Island is on the world map, let us look at the island's geography. Now, I'm not going to name off every single location within this game's map this time, but you can see from this image that it is very unique from Hyrule's map. Although, the more I look at it, the more this map's layout sort of reminds me of Zelda 1986 map. Just a little bit. But what makes this island so unique, though, is its egg that sits upon the tallest mountain of the game, Mount Tamarank. Inside the egg is the sleeping windfish, who was trapped by the nightmares of his dream. I'll give you a few more seconds to look at the map, but after that, I believe that we are ready to move on to the next part of the video. Link's Awakening doesn't have as many important characters as the past games do, but there's still quite an interesting group of people on this dream island. First of all, we have Link, who, as the manual stated, once saved Hyrule from Ganon's evil rule. When he ends up on Koholint Island, he is actually the only Hylian there. Every other humanoid character such as Marin and Terran, who have a father-daughter relationship, have round ears, which means that they are simply humans rather than Hylians. Any other living character that isn't a human are actually animals who come from Animal Village to the east, including bunnies, bears, crocodiles, and even a mermaid who makes her home in the waters of Martha's Bay. Other than that, there's the Windfish, who is a god that watches over the sea, and the owl that guides Link, who is actually a part of the Windfish's spirit. And lastly, we have the Nightmares, which include all of the bosses within the dungeons of the game, and the final boss, which takes up several forms. So now that we went over the lore, geography, and biography of Link's Awakening, let's finally place this game on the timeline. So far, it has been established that when there's nothing but chaos, 3 gods created the world with life to fill it. They also created the Triforce and left it within the Sacred Realm as a symbol of their power. However, greedy people began looking for the entrance to the Sacred Realm in order to take the Triforce for themselves, and one day, the dread bandit Ganondorf Dragmire and his gang found it. After killing his own men, Ganondorf made a wish with the Triforce, and he transformed into a boar, a form that represented the state of his soul. This was around the time when the Imprisoning War broke out, and the 7 sages, with the help of the Knights of Hyrule, sealed Ganon within the Sacred Realm to keep his evil power out of the Light World. Peace lasted for several generations, until one day a stranger named Aghanim secretly killed the King of Hyrule and took over the castle. This is when the events of A Link to the Past occur, where hero Destiny pulls the Master Sword and prevents Ganon from taking over the Light World by killing him with a blow from a light arrow. Peace arrives once again, and now that the royal family possesses the Triforce, the good king uses it to make his kingdom prosperous. Before his passing, he hides a piece of the Triforce in the Great Palace of Hyrule and prepares trials for one he deems worthy of his piece. Once the king of Hyrule dies, the prince searches everywhere for the missing piece and becomes so filled with greed that he interrogates his sister, Princess Zelda. When she refuses to reveal the whereabouts of the Triforce of Courage, she is cursed and put into an eternal sleep. The guilty Prince of Hyrule then makes a decree that all females born into the royal family must be named Zelda from now on in order to honor the cursed princess. Hyrule then begins to decline, and after some time passes, Ganon somehow returns and steals the Triforce of Power from the kingdom. Before he steals the Triforce of Wisdom, the Princess Zelda of this time breaks it into 8 pieces and scatters it across a smaller area of Hyrule. She then sends her wet nurse Impa to find a hero to find these pieces and defeat Ganon once and for all. This is then when the events of Zelda 1986 occur, where Impa eventually finds a boy named Link who goes on this journey and finds all the pieces of the Triforce of Wisdom and defeats Ganon, freeing Princess Zelda in the end. Link then goes on to help with the reconstruction of Hyrule Kingdom, until one day, the mark of the Triforce appears on his hand during his 16th birthday. He was chosen to face the king's trials that were created long ago, and Link goes on this journey in the adventure of Link, and after passing all the trials and gaining the Triforce of Courage, Link uses the entire Triforce to wake up Zelda the First. So now the question is, where does Link's awakening go? Well, we can already pinpoint a few possible areas, because in the manuals, it states that Link left Hyrule after he defeated Ganon, so this game can't take place before any of the other 3 games. But does it go after Link defeats Ganon in A Link to the Past, or after a different Link defeats Ganon in Zelda 1986? It may seem a bit confusing at first, but one detail within the final battle of Link's Awakening can prove it all. So when Link in this game fights the final nightmare, it takes on different forms, right? Well, those forms are based on Link's greatest fears, and this is evident when the nightmare takes on the form of Aghanim and later Ganon. And the only game that Link fought Aghanim in was A Link to the Past. So that must mean that sometime after the events of A Link to the Past, this same Link leaves the kingdom to train and become stronger, but is interrupted by his quest to wake the Windfish. But before he can do so, Link must face his own nightmares, which include Aghanim and Ganon. So everyone, it has been decided that Link's Awakening must take place soon after the events of A Link to the Past. I'm so glad that we now have 4 games placed on the timeline, and in the next 2 episodes we are actually going to take a look at some Zelda games that are classified as spin-offs and see if they can actually fit onto the timeline. So I'm really excited to get to those parts real soon. But anyway, thank you all so much for watching episode 5 of the Rebuild Timeline series. If there's any episodes you guys missed, I recommend going back and watching those. But in the meantime, subscribe for more Zelda videos and feel free to become a member in my layer via Discord. And consider following me on Twitter and Instagram. Have an awesome rest of your day, and I'll see you on our next adventure.